Sarah Rich for you.
Oh. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Rich. What's going on? Oh, yeah.
Roll. Action, please.
So if you're looking at this picture,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't looking at it.
Could take months, even years before this ruling over the Affordable Care Act is settled, leaving millions of Americans in limbo and putting even more pressure on Congress.
Okay, cool. I'll let him know. Yeah, I'll look it up. Okay.
Could take months, even years before this ruling over the Affordable Care Act is settled, leaving millions of Americans in limbo, and putting even more pressure on Republicans and on Congress and President Trump.
And is this in? No.
Kenneth Moon, mic check 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, mic check. Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It could take months, even years. Here's what this ruling over the Affordable Care Act is settled, leaving millions of Americans in limbo and putting even more pressure on Congress and President Trump. but putting even more pressure on Congress. I do. Liz and Tony, it could take months, even years before this ruling over the Affordable Care Act is settled, leaving millions of Americans in limbo and putting even more pressure on Congress and President Trump. Is there a long delay? Must be. Okay, cool.
I mean, if New York could hold the files that we do, but we have to pay per use, so we don't have to do that. Well, and we have to pay now, so they don't have to do that.
There will be no immediate changes to the Affordable Care Act. The lower court's ruling will make its way through the legal system until it reaches the Supreme Court or Congress and the President take action. There will be no immediate changes to the Affordable Care Act. The lower court's ruling will make its way through the legal system until it reaches the Supreme Court or Congress and the President take action. Reporting live here in Washington, Kenneth Moten, ABC 30 Action News. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hello, hello. Hey, I got you, Joni. How are you? All right. Sounds good. Hey, Allison. How are you? No, happy to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. No, it's good. Yeah, as long as you're not throwing me like a hard curveball about like Holy Cross or something, we'll be in business. We'll be good. Alrighty. All right, sounds good. Thanks, Allison. Absolutely. He did a remarkable job this year. And probably what was most obvious was when he made the choice to go from Brandon Wimbush as a starting quarterback to Ian Book. I mean, that's not an easy decision to make, especially when Brandon Wimbush just engineered one of the biggest wins they've had in quite some time just a couple weeks earlier. But after the Vanderbilt game, they recognized that the offense wasn't clicking the way they needed it to. And then they put Ian Book in, and the offense now has reached highs that I don't think a lot of us could have anticipated this early in the season, or at this point of the season. So it's really remarkable the job that he's been able to do in regards to making the difficult decision. And then, too, this feels like an award that's been about 6 years in the making, too. You look at that team in 2012, they came up short in the national championship, and he vowed to get that team and that program to where they can compete with the Alabamas and the Clemsons of the world. And it's really just remarkable to see how much this program's grown over the last few years, and now to see them in the college football playoff for the first time. Well, Trevor Lawrence has been great. He certainly doesn't look like a freshman. That's one thing that's really obvious is that he doesn't play like a freshman. But one thing that Clemson's done a really good job of this year is run the football. So them being able to really pound the football and use Travis Etienne, who's one of the best running backs in college football, to use him as a feature and focal point of this offense, and then not really force Trevor Lawrence into a lot of difficult situations. I mean, they've made the game plan pretty simple. Hey, we're going to run the football over and over and over again, and if you can't stop it, we're going to continue to do it. But if you do stop it, that means you're probably going to have to contribute an extra defender into the box and make sure that you stop the run and emphasize that, which is going to leave your defensive backs isolated against our superstars at wide receivers. So they've done a really good job in bringing him along. It'll be really interesting to see if after 15 bowl practices, when you finally have some time to take a deep breath and to evaluate yourself, if Trevor Lawrence comes out in the postseason and plays like a different guy, if he elevates his play where he's capable of just based on his talent. So they've done a great job of bringing him along, and that's going to be a huge test for Notre Dame to contain not just Trevor Lawrence, but also the run game for Clemson. Yeah. It's a fascinating question. I think we're all curious, right? I mean, we've seen Notre Dame, though, of late, especially up front over the last few years. I mean, that group on the offensive line, even though they lose a couple first-rounders off of last year's team and Quentin Nelson and McGlinchey, that group hasn't fallen off the way I think most people expected it to. They thought that they'd kind of fall back into mediocrity. Now, maybe they're not a position of dominance anymore, but they're still very much a position of strength. And as far as Clemson's concerned, the biggest key is going to be making sure that defensive line for Clemson, you're not going to be able to just contain them. 4 wide, you just can't just sit there and block them all day long. But you have to get them thinking. You have to get them going sideways, sideline to sideline. So expect Notre Dame to use a lot of misdirection, where maybe they fake a run to the left and they book out to the right, or they fake a run, they throw it over the top. So expect a lot of misdirection and to get that group playing a little bit slower, because I'm not sure any group can block them over and over again over the course of a 70-play game. So that's a fascinating matchup to watch, and if Notre Dame can get the running game going, that'll obviously open up the passing game and the play-action passing game, which is such a huge part of what they want to do offensively. I'm going to go with Clemson, and it's going to be very close. A lot of people are predicting this to be a one-sided affair. I don't see it, because when I look at teams, it's not so much about looking at the firepower that they have. I look at, how sound are they? How well coached are they? And Notre Dame has very few weaknesses. I'm not sure they have many weaknesses at all. But where I think they might have their hands full, and Julian Love is a great cornerback. They're very good on the perimeter, and they have some disruptive pieces up front. But I'm not sure they've seen a wide receiver core quite as talented as the group that they're going to see when they face off against Clemson. So I just wonder if in those one-on-one isolations, if Notre Dame can shut down those wide receivers throughout the course of a 60-minute game and keep those receivers in front of them. So I like Clemson to win a close one, but I fully expect Notre Dame to be highly competitive and to make this game very intriguing. Thanks. Good luck to the Irish. What's up, Jenny? Alrighty. Beautiful. Hey, what's going on, man? Hey, Clay, how are you? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no problem. I can hear a little, I can hear an echo in the background. I don't know if that's on our end or what, but I didn't know if you could hear that. I think it might be gone now. I don't hear it anymore. All right, beautiful. Yeah, we're good now. I called 2 Ohio State games. Yeah, so I had Oregon State and then Maryland. Thumbs down. I'm not one that wants to see it expand. 4 teams works because we're trying to crown one worthy champion, right? And if we were to expand and open the door up for second chances, I can't support that line of thinking in college football. I did not, especially if we're going to be prisoners of the moment and based on the final performance, right? Everyone said, well, Tua didn't win it because of his final performance. Well, if we're going based on the final weekend, the best quarterback of the weekend was Dwayne Haskins against a good Northwestern group. So I actually saw it very close, 1, 2, and 3. I did have Haskins third on my ballot, but it wasn't by much. I think he had a terrific season. Yeah, and it wouldn't be because he wouldn't be benefited. Like, he would be so benefited by another year in college, but I just have to look at the rest of the quarterback crop, and he's the best option. I mean, am I better than Justin Herbert? If I'm him, I'm looking at him saying, okay, I'm better than Justin Herbert. I feel like I'm better than Clayton Thorson. I feel like I'm better than the kid at Duke, Daniel Jones. I feel like I'm better than most of the guys in the draft right now. So I would have to look at the rest of the quarterback crop and say, you know, I have a real high likelihood of being a top 5 pick. So yeah, I think he might have to turn pro just based on the lack of availability of other good quarterbacks in the draft. I was a little surprised. I thought that the end was coming to a close at some point. I just didn't expect it to be this year. I thought it might be next year. And obviously there was a lot of turmoil that surrounded the program this year. And I believe it was an extremely stressful environment for Urban to be in. And he recognized that, hey, I need to just walk away. So I just thought that he would do it on his terms, not where it felt like it was, you know, popular opinion or public opinion for he could maybe be like pushed out the door. So I thought it'd be next year or maybe the year after so he could kind of announce it and they could have a very clear way of transitioning from him to Ryan Day. But him doing it as abruptly as he did, I was shocked by that. But I know the team's going to play great in the Rose Bowl, and Ryan Day is more than capable. He's a tremendous hire, and I'm so excited to see what he does with the program and how he changes it and makes it kind of his own. I'm not, because if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Like that's the saying we have down here in the South, and right now Urban Meyer and his process has put together one of the most remarkable stretches we've ever seen by a Big Ten team. So I don't think they need to bring in an outside influence when everything that they're doing is currently working and working at a very high level. So I actually love the hire of Ryan Day. When we were there, we covered them early in the season when we covered their game against Oregon State. And I remember visiting with Ryan Day and walking out and thinking, man, that guy's a star. That was the first impression. I'd never met the guy before, but he was a star. And you could just tell that bright things were in his future. And the fact that he's the head coach at Ohio State, it's a big opportunity, obviously. He's going to be operating under a magnifying glass, but he's more than capable of handling the load and will do a remarkable job with the Buckeyes. I would have given it to Ryan Day. I mean, immediately, just because I wouldn't want it to. I wouldn't want it to change. I'm sorry. Is Dwayne coming back? We got to figure that out. Because if he's coming back, anything less than 11, I'd be disappointed, right? I mean, the standard for Ohio State is clear. Okay, win 11 games, go 11-1 at the bare minimum, and win the Big Ten. Like that's a good season, and a disappointing season is anything less than that. National championship season is elite, but the standard has been set that 10, 11 wins at the bare minimum every single year has to be the standard for Ohio State. That's the type of program that they have, and that's what we've come to expect from them. SEC right now is deeper. And it wasn't. I would have said actually. Go ahead. I'm still trying to figure that out. That day is coming, though, I can assure you. I feel as though I'm getting older. Every year is like dog years. I feel like I'm in coaching. Ooh. I haven't been around Tom enough to be able to say, but I can't pick against myself, at least on the Wonderlic. I'm not taking the Mensa. That's impossible. I've done that on the airline magazines. I'm out on Mensa, but I will take the Wonderlic against anybody. I feel good about that. I love Columbus. I really do. I think it is, as someone that's never really been to a game in the Big Ten prior to getting into broadcasting, I was blown away. My second ever assignment as a game broadcaster was in Columbus. And it was rainy, it was nasty, and the fan base was going crazy. It was literally like 60 degrees, sideways rain. It was a couple years ago against Tulsa, and the fan base just blew me away. And I've never really been accustomed, I never knew much about Big Ten football prior to that. As far as the experience within the stadium, I've watched the tape, of course, but the experience in the stadium is incredible. And I rate college football towns based on passion for the sport itself and for their team. And there's very few that are alongside of Columbus, and almost none that would surpass them in regards to their support. Thanks so much. Hey, Jenny. Sounds good. Hey, Jeff, what's up, buddy? Doing great, man. How's everything? Good, buddy. Glad to hear it. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be back. I'm ready whenever y'all are. I mean, if there's ever been a year, how can this not be the one, right? I mean, I for one, am perfectly okay with Brian Kelly winning the award. He did a great job this year managing a roster that had to replace some stars. He made a quarterback change in the middle of the season when they were 3-0. Like, he had to make some challenging decisions. There's no denying that, but Nick Saban also had to do the same thing. So to be honest with you, if I were to submit, and this is not me being a resident Birminghamian, Bill Clark would be on that list, Nick Saban would be on that list, Brian Kelly would be on that list. There'd be a lot of guys that I'd consider for Coach of the Year, and if I had one vote this year and I had to give it to somebody, it'd be hard for me not to give it to Nick Saban. Must have. Yes, you think? Yeah. I mean, if you're really not going to have him at one, that's fine. I can understand that if you feel like Brian Kelly should have been in the first place, but how can you not have Saban at two? Like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So, yes, I've said a lot of things. There's a lot of Bama fatigue right now, and just kind of journeying out and venturing around the college football world and kind of going all over the place, I realize just how much people loathe the university when it comes to football and their prowess, and just how tired they are of having the same result every year. They feel like Bama's ruining the parity in college football. Well, beat them. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, it probably does have something to do with that. But honestly, when you look at it, those are two very deserving candidates that also got considered. Josh Heupel, I was a little surprised that he was one of the finalists, just given the fact that he inherited that program and did a great job this year managing expectations. But I didn't feel like he should have been in that conversation along with Brian Kelly and Nick Saban. But you know, someone has to win, someone has to lose. It's unfortunate that our guy lost, but Brian Kelly is a worthy recipient. Potentially, because when you look at the Jalen Tua situation, those were two capable guys. I mean, both guys had had success. Now, Wimbush had all the time in the world to prove himself and show that he was the better option of the two. And finally, after 3 games, they finally said, all right, enough's enough. I mean, we got to make a move. And I can understand why Brian Kelly has been praised for that. But it is difficult to do for 3 games into the season, just 2 weeks removed after you beat Michigan. Like, there's some good moments that Wimbush had at times this year. It's much like Saban got allotted or just lauded last year for how he handled the national championship. Things weren't going well in the first half, got to make a switch. And as a result, people have credited Nick Saban and Coach Saban for that being the best move of his career. I know I've said that for sure. It was a remarkably bold move, and it paid off, thank goodness. But it is obviously a difficult move to make for Brian Kelly, but I would argue, yes, that the Jalen Tua decision would probably have a chance to have been a little more polarizing. Yes. To be honest with you, I don't know if anyone could have predicted this level of consistency. Just that's what's so remarkable. I mean, we see teams that go to the playoff in one year, like in 2015, Michigan State goes to the playoff. The next year they finish 4-8. I mean, we've seen teams like Notre Dame who are in the playoff this year that are just 2 years removed from going without a winning season. I mean, we see unbelievable parity in college football. Alabama's SEC East opponent in the SEC championship game in 2 of the last 4 years was Florida. Florida went to the SEC championship in 15 and in 16, only to miss a bowl game in 17. I mean, it's just remarkable how quickly things can flip. So to think every year that Alabama's winning 11 or 12 games is remarkable. It really is. And I'm not sure anyone could have predicted that. You talk to people that know the sport like the back of their hand, that have been following it for generations, and they shake their head and just marvel at the consistency, especially today too, Jeff. When you think about the type of player you're having to recruit, so not only are you going and getting talented players, but you're having to massage a lot of egos. I mean, that's not easy to do. And at Alabama, they keep bringing in 5-star after 5-star after 5-star after 4-star after 5-star. And for those guys not to kind of make a fuss when they're not thrust into a starting lineup as a true freshman, but they buy in, they develop, and they get better under his watch, that's a real testament to his leadership as well. So I fully expected Alabama to contend for and win championships at a very high rate. In 2010, when we walked away from the Rose Bowl, I thought we'd win it the next year too. But I'm not sure anyone could have envisioned a scenario in which they'd make the playoff 5 straight years and they'd win the SEC as many times as they've had and win 12, 13 games almost every year. That's a tough question. It's a good question. I like it because Kyler Murray proposes a really unique and interesting matchup just because when you look at Kyler Murray, some of his game resembles Johnny Manziel a little bit. His ability to scramble and improvise, and he's not the biggest guy in the world, so a small hit radius when you do have an opportunity to rush the passer. So I would say Johnny Manziel probably. I'm trying to think of some other great quarterbacks that Alabama's teed it up against in recent years that have had some success against him. Chad Kelly was a pretty good quarterback, but Kyler Murray is significantly more challenging to defend, just giving his ability to improvise. So I would probably say since Johnny Manziel, it's been about 5 years, and I'm not sure they've seen a guy that's quite like that. That can throw it and run it. Now, Nick Marshall was a handful. No doubt Nick Marshall was a tremendous player, but he was a little more one-dimensional than Kyler, which would make him a little more easy to defend. It's not going to be a bad thing. That I can assure you. What I've been kind of confused about is when looking and evaluating Auburn. What I have a hard time understanding is, okay, what was the line last year between Chip Lindsey, Gus Malzahn, and quarterback? Like, how was that flow working? The flow of information. Was Gus kind of getting into that conversation and changing plays and adjusting, or was he limiting Chip Lindsey? Like, I just didn't know how that information, what was the organizational chart for that pecking order. So I think now, at least Gus now has the ownership. He's going to be the only voice. Yeah, Dillingham will have obviously a bit of an effect in regards to game planning. Cody Burns will have a role as well. But on game day, to have one singular voice is a positive, especially for a guy that played quarterback. I know that having one voice was very beneficial to me, and I hope for whoever is quarterback for Auburn next year, that'll be beneficial for them as well. Magic. I mean, this guy's unbelievable. I mean, he's the way he can layer the football, the way he can anticipate holes in the defense. I don't get it sometimes. Like, sometimes you watch it and you watch great players a lot. I mean, we've seen our fair share of tremendous players at quarterback over the last decade. There's been so many great ones throughout college football and throughout the Southeast. But I mean, when you look at a guy that isn't exactly the most physically imposing, but he just finds a way to throw guys open, and he locates the football with such precision, the game just moves slower to him. And I know the performance against Georgia was disappointing, but man, he's magical to watch this year. And as far as just appreciating efficient quarterback play, you'd be hard-pressed to find one better, not just this year in college football, but over the last 5 in college football. He's that efficient and has that good of a feel for what you're trying to do offensively. So I just can't wait to see where his career continues to blossom and where he continues to grow. And hopefully he brings home some hardware next year that he came up just short in this year. Yeah. Yep. Sounds good. Alrighty. No worries. No problem. Yeah, no worries. Sounds good. Well, just remember when it comes down to gambling lines and stuff like that, it's not always about who Vegas thinks is going to win. It's about who the national public thinks is going to win. And Penn State, at this point, has accomplished more in recent years than Kentucky has. We saw Kentucky last year play in a bowl game and struggle. And a lot of those guys are back this year, and they're so much better, but nobody knows it. Everyone was looking at Kentucky saying, how the heck are they ranked number 9 in the country just a few weeks ago? Well, it's because they weren't watching. They needed to watch the quality that they had on defense and how well they were able to run the football and how they were able to control the line of scrimmage offensively. So big reason why Penn State is probably a big favorite is because we've seen them play in and compete against some of the best that college football has to offer in recent years. 2 years ago in the bowl game against USC in the Rose Bowl, remarkable game. They won it. Last year they won the Fiesta Bowl. So probably just recency bias and seeing Penn State play like an elite program of late is why they're probably favored considerably in the eyes of many in Vegas. Well, Trace McSorley's off the charts good. You guys will love watching him. I know you might not like some of the plays he might make in the game, but he's a much better option as a passer than Nick Fitzgerald. Nick Fitzgerald's a solid runner, but every single play that Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State would run, it almost had like a wildcat feel. He's a run-first player that can throw it, but is not overly accurate, whereas Trace McSorley is significantly smaller than Nick Fitzgerald, but is really dynamic both with his legs and with his arms. So you're going to really like and enjoy competing against him. He's one of the best in college football and has been for quite some time over the last few years. And as far as Miles Sanders is concerned, he's a big, bruising running back that is also very explosive in the open field. I've been very impressed with how he's filled the void of Saquon Barkley. Now, is he Saquon Barkley? No, but no one is. So don't take it personal. But Miles Sanders, he's going to pose a pretty significant threat. And I would say that the offensive skill for Penn State is significantly better than the offensive skill than Mississippi State has. Now, Kylan Hill from Mississippi State, the running back, off the charts good. But other than that, they kind of struggle at wide receiver with consistency, and their offensive line is really big, but not overly athletic. So it should be a very nice matchup between Kentucky's defense, which has been really solid all season long, against what is a very potent group and a capable group in Penn State's offense. Well, think about that, man. I mean, everything about Kentucky this year has been so good and so solid, and this was the team that Mark Stoops has been waiting on, right, for years. I mean, a lot of youth. They started 2-3 years ago, and then sure enough, here they are as seniors competing amongst some of the best in the country. They ended the streak against Florida, so the narrative has already changed in the people that have covered the Southeastern Conference, but I still think it still has a ways to go when it comes to the national perspective. Like, for those of us that study the SEC, all of us are like, man, Kentucky's legit. But for the people that kind of just, they kind of watch everything, but maybe don't dive in as intently as they need to, there's probably still some work to be done for Kentucky. But getting to a 10-win season, knocking off the likes of Penn State in the bowl game would give them unbelievable momentum heading into the 2019 season. This season's already chalked up as a success, win or lose in the bowl game. But a 10-win season with a win over a ranked Penn State team and with an opportunity like this, January 1st on ABC, I mean, you got to take full advantage of that when you're Kentucky, because these opportunities are few and far between. So I'm excited to see what they do with it, and I fully believe they'll have a great performance. Well, they obviously have a tremendous passion for football. I mean, look at Benny Snell. I mean, he has nothing more to prove. But, I mean, obviously, he just can't stand the fact that his teammates could be out there grinding and playing, and he wouldn't be out there with them. So he's just the ultimate competitor. I'm not surprised. And Josh Allen, I mean, he's going to be a high pick. And there's no doubt that he's very loyal to Kentucky. Not many teams were on him. Nobody really recruited him, said he was too small. Well, Kentucky did. They took a chance on him, and I think he just really appreciates that opportunity to put that jersey on every week. So I'm not surprised, just knowing the individuals, that either one of those two guys is going to be teeing it up in the bowl game, and would expect them to have a great performance. I think it's going to be a great game. I really do. It's one of the most compelling games that's not in the New Year's Six. I would lean slightly towards Penn State just because Trace McSorley is such a dynamic quarterback and he's so difficult to defend. But it would be very slight. It's going to be a fascinating matchup in the trenches because Penn State's solid in the trenches, but Kentucky moves people off the ball, man. It's just a matter of how much work they want to give Benny Snell and how true they are to the plan that they've had all along. I would favor Penn State just slightly, but it wouldn't be by a significant portion, that's for sure. Thanks, man. Okay. All righty. Yes. Yes, what's going on, buddy? What's up, man? How are you? Okay. Right. Okay, sounds good. Yes, I can hear you. Alrighty. Well, Duke is actually very balanced. I mean, they have a good, solid nucleus on defense, a couple of players at all three levels that have a chance to play at the next level. And then on offense, they have Daniel Jones, a quarterback, who's really done a great job and has kind of sneaked his way up the draft boards for a lot of people. I know I saw Kuiper and those guys at one point had him in like the late teens, which is a little high for me, but then again, I mean, he's a guy with a good performance against Temple that could maybe elevate its stock, especially in a year when quarterbacks are kind of few and far between. So Duke's a solid team. Coach Cutcliffe's going to have those guys ready to go, and I think Temple's going to have to play really well to win the game. Well, one thing that I've been impressed by is, and Temple hasn't always been at 100% this year. They've had to deal with some issues and some inconsistencies at certain positions. But one thing I've been impressed by, and it's with Jeff Collins, I'm not surprised. With Jeff Collins, this team plays hard, man. I mean, they play hard. It's as though every time they take the field, it's like it's got a chance to be their last. And there's been times when they've been outmatched. I mean, they've played a couple games that got a little away from them from time to time. But I'll tell you what, man, when this team is on the field, you know you're going to get their best effort. And if you need any more proof, just look at the interim coach going down to Shreveport and talking about that matchup and him just pounding the table and going nuts talking about how hard that team was going to play. So that's probably their biggest strength is just how hard they play and the fact that they approach every game like they have a chip on their shoulder. Well, I think you can look at it two ways. You can look at it and say, well, we're doing a heck of a job because our coach keeps getting taken. So that's a positive, and it remains an attractive job for up-and-coming coaches. I mean, Jeff Collins was an up-and-comer, had a few different opportunities. He goes to Temple for a couple years, boom, head job in the ACC. Manny Diaz has long been considered a star in the making as a defensive coordinator. Now he's up there. Hopefully he's there longer than Jeff Collins and longer than those coaches that came before him, but usually if coaches are leaving, it's because you're doing something right. So you can look at it in a few different ways, and I happen to look at it as a positive because if our coach keeps getting targeted and hired by big-time programs, that means we're winning a lot of football games, and I would certainly take that. I would love to at some point get to a point where I'm not considered a stepping stone, but also too, I mean, I think it can put some challenges out there, but it also can be a tipping point for the players. We just saw App State on Saturday, App State lost their head coach, Scott Satterfield, to Louisville. They go out and they absolutely destroy Middle Tennessee. So I'm not sure it has a huge effect on the players. You're going to play for the guys that are next to you, not necessarily the guys that are on the sideline. But I've always viewed it as a positive. Having a lot of coaching turnover for positive reasons like Temple's had means that the program is on good, stable footing, and Power 5 programs are still recognizing the quality that they have in their coaches. Well, I got to be honest. I'm only 30, so I don't have the greatest like historical perspective, because my knowledge of college football really is over the last 2 decades when I really studied it and watched it. And I know Penn State, some of their great years with Kerry Collins and Todd Blackledge and those guys. I mean, I know that they were great players. I don't know how McSorley stacks up to him, but if he's not up there close to him, he's got to be somewhere right behind. I mean, Trace McSorley has been so remarkable, and even when he stepped in for an injured Hackenberg in the bowl game 4 years ago, you just knew this kid had something about him. He was playing Georgia at the time, and man, Hackenberg hadn't really done much, and in comes McSorley, and boom, starts lighting it up all over the field. And I've just really grown to love the kid. I love watching him play. I think he's the ultimate competitor. He's extremely accurate with the football. He's a willing runner and is capable with the ball in his hands as a runner. And he's very accurate. I mean, if I'm looking at a guy that is going to play on Sundays, he might not be a starter on Sundays, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he played 10 years as a backup or as a spot starter here and there. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Colt McCoy. And Colt McCoy was a great player in his own right in Texas and one of the best that ever did it for the Longhorns. And I'm sure you can make a lot of the same comparisons to Trace McSorley and how he's been able to play over the course of his career. So I love the kid. I'm sad to see him go. I'm also sad that maybe the year didn't amount to what he had thought it might look like. I'm disappointed to him, for him. I wish he could have had that chance to guide his team into the college football playoff. I know that was one box left unchecked, and I'm disappointed too that he didn't get a little more consideration for the Heisman Trophy. The numbers just weren't there. But when you look back at some of the great Nittany Lion quarterbacks, and he's got to be right there alongside of some of the best, and he's certainly been one of my favorites, that's for sure. Well, I mean, they have a quarterback that's mobile, and if you look at Kentucky and what they've really excelled with is they have great pass rushers. Josh Allen is one of the best defensive players in all of college football, won a bunch of trophies just a couple weeks ago because of that dominance that he has coming off the edge. And that's going to be a handful, but their quarterback's mobile. I mean, Trace McSorley can get you out of trouble. I would say another thing, too, that Penn State's really had a lot of success with is if you look at their performances in bowl games the last 2 years under James Franklin, man, they've been ready to roll, and they've come out of the gate fast. If you look at how they played 2 years ago in the Rose Bowl against SC, that was one of the great bowl games we've ever seen. And then last year, I mean, just from start to finish, just pouring it on Washington. Now, the score got a little close there in the second half, but, I mean, it was never really in doubt. That was Penn State's ball game from start to finish. So they've done a really good job in preparing for bowl games. They come out with a sense of urgency. So that's one thing that they've done really well in recent years, and I would expect them to do again against Kentucky. You got it, brother.